Sure.
This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show on this public holiday, Freedom Day, and that is what we're celebrating. Well, Katlego Mabue has the privilege of sharing something that's a lot closer to home. 3 poets in our studio that will be performing later on for us, but first we want to know more about them.
Now, Freedom Day commemorates the day in 1994 where the very first democratic elections were held in South Africa. Now, fast forward 22 years later, and the definition of the word freedom has evolved quite dramatically. And now 4 performance poets have decided that they're going to tackle this issue head-on by creating a once-in-a-lifetime show, fittingly named 22 Poems for 22 Years of Freedom. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Akona, Spogazi, and Sipho to our Feel Good Breakfast Show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So I've got to ask, first of all, Akona, whose brainchild was this, and what is the aim of 22 Poems for 22 Years of Freedom?
The show is my brainchild. I thought of it last year when we did 21 years for 21 poems for 21 years of freedom.
Yeah.
And at that time, my thoughts were around our democracy finally, being an adult, because the whole time we were in the teenage years of democracy with the years from 1994. And I thought, let's do something to start a conversation about what freedom means to us as poets and what freedom means to everyone, and trying to get the voices of South Africans into our poems and talk about what the freedom means and what 21 years have brought for us. And now we're doing 22 years, 22 poems, and we're still carrying on with that conversation.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is going to be going down in the form of spoken word,
Poetry,
spoken poetry.
yes.
Is there a different, is it spoken word or spoken poetry? How do you define it?
Well, I think there are different ways to actually articulate, because there's performance poetry,
Okay.
there's spoken word, and when I think about spoken word, it has its roots in hip hop, it has its roots in praise poetry, if you think, especially in Africa, and it's really poetry in performance. So moving it from the page and taking it behind the mic, taking it to the stage, and so we're primarily spoken word poets.
Yeah. And then Sipho, how would you describe the different poets that are going to be on stage performing for 22 Poems for 22 Years of Freedom? If you could give their style, if you will, like a word, like just bang, just something to give, to describe what they do.
Well, for Spogazi Jonas, for example, I would go with explosive. Lots of energy on stage. For Kyle, it would have to be earnest, because he really bears his soul on stage. For Akona, probably soulful, because you can really feel the soul in her poetry.
Yeah.
And for myself, probably evolutionary, in that I'm still building this persona. I'm there to share part of me and grow from the experience.
Yeah. And I mean, this is aimed, I think, at continuing a very important conversation, that of freedom. What does freedom mean? Do we even have freedom? What are we still fighting for? That kind of thing. So if somebody were to ask you, what does freedom mean to you? What would you say?
Well, I think for me, freedom is really about equality, equal access to resources, to everything that this land really has to share, but also the guarantee of a future for future generations, because freedom doesn't mean anything if it stops with us.
Yeah.
We have to ensure that our children, their children, have something to work with, have an abundant life as well. So that for me is freedom. It's equal access for everyone.
Yeah. And so in summary, Akona, what can people and audiences expect during the show?
They can expect poetry from really great poets. They can expect enlightenment, a discussion of issues that they face every day, whatever background they come from, because we're talking about the struggles of the poor, about the rich, everyone really who is a South African and who has tasted this freedom or has not, because some could say that we are not yet free.
Absolutely.
So they can expect a lot of awesome poetry.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for bringing 22 Poems for 22 Years of Freedom to us, and good luck with the show that I hope that it does keep on going forward in inspiring our young generation. But right now, here's what happens when you combine a poetical warrior, a profound vocalist, and a fruit vendor with an ear for the piano. Well, you get a never-seen-before type of experience. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce, for the very first time ever on television, Josh Fruit Vendor Prinsloo, Ziku Profound Ndabezitha, and the award-winning Kyle Lowe.
story back again. The leaders don't love us, they just pretend. When will the cycle ever end? Ain't it funny how they wanna spend our money on mansions and we live in shacks and pay all the tax. I can't eat, I can't sleep anymore. 270494. Where are the rights I voted for?
She sits in her high perch covered in dirt. You see, she has never had to question her own worth. Just believe the bird seed she was fed, misled by pigeon vision parents squawking ideals into her head like you clean and you preen because we have worked really white for everything we have bought. Excuse me, Miss Sparrow, a penny for your thoughts. He has never been much of a listener. Ironic, considering that's what he gets paid to do. Always been more of a talker, paid his dues, but never had to walk a mile in your shoes. He sits in his booth, worshipped by many, but an idol to very few. If only he knew that true answers cannot be found on air, but buried deep beneath the roots. So before we chat, let's uncover the truth. These rust walls don't need just cause. Dreams thrust all and degrees bust doors, but we refuse to open our hearts as we chant fees must fall. A lot of white people are still struggling to rise to the occasion. Most of us still don't understand that the word privilege isn't even linked to our occupation, or how little we've had to war for our wage. But it seems perfectly okay to jump on Twitter, hashtag Black Lives Matter, and pretend to engage. You know, we might just dismantle whiteness if we fight this desire to want to be right. If our actions start to offer less demand and more supply, less tell and more show, if we create authentic dialogue that unclogs incognito ego, so we know for me, it's not about being revolutionary. On this stage, I could care less about leaving behind a legacy, because when I page through every library, my people have already stolen most of history. We defaced you, displaced you, crusaded wooden stakes through violence and oppression, and then turned around and taught ourselves silence in confession. But long before the system switched on, before Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, before Exodus, your ancestors echoed exit us. Before the burning bush, we set fire to your cross. But the world will not write about this. After all, ignorance is bliss. Excuse me, Gareth. It seems we've all stumbled a little too close to that cliff. And now, I live in a racist society where I benefit from white supremacy. And that leaves me feeling guilty, so instead of doing the right thing, I search for solutions to help absolve my sin. I use instant gratification to appease my cultural appropriation. I steal spectrums of light in the pursuit of a rainbow nation. In 1994, we tore 3 or 4 laws, but born freeze. Porn, please. 22 years later, and black kings are still the weakest across this board. Their queens' voices remain cursed. And what's worse, even if you think there is equality in this game of chess, the white pieces are still getting to move first.